Hello, I'm Jeremy Rivera, your unscripted podcast host. I'm here with Charlie Birch, who's going to introduce her company. And as she does, I want her to focus on her experience in life that makes her a trusted expert in her niche.
Okay. All right. So, hi, everyone. Jeremy, thank you for having me on the show. I'm super excited to be here. I am the founder and creative director of Humanize Collective, and my life and how that makes me uniquely qualified to be trustworthy in my role. Actually, my background is not in marketing or design or any of the things that a lot of other brand strategists and experts may come from that world. My background is actually in performance and psychology. And as I kind of moved through the world, tried on this entrepreneurial founder hat thing that kept like smacking me in the face, it just kind of came around to, oh, brand is something I'm really passionate about. It's something I'm uniquely qualified. I think not that there aren't tons of people who are qualified, but my background actually puts me in a really interesting position to do that work. Um, in my previous chapters, when I was going to be a psychologist, um, I worked in a psychiatric day school in a crisis intervention. So I'm really interested in like what goes wrong with brand and what's the human impact of that and how can we prevent those crises from like taking down the ship. And so I actually do have some real life experience with real real big crisis. I also, like I said, my background is in performance, and I think I talk about this a lot. Like, brand is I would never encourage someone to go like the inauthenticity route, but at the end of the day, like there is an inherently performative nature to brand. Like we're projecting out into the world what we want permission to do with other people's time, money, resources, right? And so there is
Yeah.
an inherent part of it that requires you to be able to captivate the attention of an audience, maintain that attention, resonate with them, pull their heartstrings in the right kind of ways, and to do that in a way that's not going to like spiral into a crisis. You know what I mean? So it's just this year has been a really, 2025, I guess I should say, has been a really interesting year of like reflecting on the full circle of my life trajectory because I really am feeling for the first time like the trans. I've always felt I have a lot of transferable skills from my previous life in the work I was doing, which was previously like website design first and brand second. But now that I'm doing this really like deep identity development work with our clients and the transfer of that identity to other people in their organization, I really feel a lot like when I tell people I have transferable skills and I explain what they are, like people can see what I'm talking about and they're not just kind of taking my word for it. I hope that answers your question.
It
I
it
love that
does.
question. Like, tell me through your lived experience. That's a new one for me. So I hope I did it service.
I would say off the cuff, having crisis management and, health line is definitely a great additional life skill to handle what's been happening in SEO. Many of my fellow SEOs have expressed kind of dismay at, this factor or that factor. But I love what you're talking about brand, and I wanna dig into that concept and how you understand it and how you're seeing, the concept of brand through the lens of Google's hard realities, and reflected in the algorithm choices, reflected in what pieces of information that they pick up and process and then extrapolate into results. Because there's kind of two sides, right? There's the brand in terms of your choice as a company of how to front, um, so to speak. And then there's how you create a stack of marketing resources that are supposed to align with that, and then how that's consumed by the information ecosystems, which then is surfaced to the end user. My friend Chris Tweeton at Spacebar Collective said, publishing more won't fix a weak SEO game. It's about leverage. It's not a volume game. you have to leverage the right people at the right time with the right personal identity, the brand identity matters as much, and your positioning. So, what is it in that stack of output that you're putting out there that's having the largest impact on that information space that's getting consumed right now?
Yeah. I mean, I think, I I have been witness to and participant in many power struggles between copywriter, brand-oriented copywriters, SEO copywriters, brand-oriented website designers, SEO-oriented website designers. I've been up to my eyeballs in that for years, and I think the pendulum swings back and forth, and there's been times when I could confidently make the argument that the experience of the people who land on your website is going to have a bigger impact on your ranking than the amount of pages that rank has on your ranking, right? Like and it's kind of swinging. And I actually just recently um, participated, one of our longstanding clients who historically had a very small website. She had a 5-page informational site, and we designed it to be like super low friction. Like people are going to come to the website, they're going to land on one of the 5 pages, and all roads lead to Rome. Like every click is going to take them to a book an intake, book an intake, because it's a
Mhm.
psychotherapy practice, social work practice, and the people are in crisis, and they don't want to have to wade through like a bunch of dense information. And she hired recently an SEO team, and they're really looking at like doing like a volume and density of keyword play on the website, and there's all these pages, and it was really like, okay, if your assumption is that um you know Jane Doe over here is going to find the website from this page, and she's going to be the right person to find the website from this page, and you want her to then like click through and convert through that page, then we have to make the assumption that like the impact of the design, the brand coming through is just as important as the page's ability to capture is just as important as the page's ability to resonate and convert.
Mhm.
And I know that like I just don't see any point in which that's gonna be untrue. And I think the biggest challenge, the biggest crisis I see is like the ability for experts in all those lanes to marry their strategies. Like, and I see
Mhm.
this all over the place, right? Like, yes, you have a strategy that your agency deploys that works like for your clients in the very narrow lane in which you're measuring the success of your clients. But what about everything else? Like, what about what about all the periphery, right? And so I think, and that's a big reason why I started Humanize in the first place, was I felt like, as somebody who was working kind of in the freelancer space, and I was over here doing this project, and my other freelance colleagues are over here on the other side of the business doing this, and like all these siloed things, and we all want, especially as freelancers or as agencies, we all want to think that like our offer is the thing that's going to move the needle for our clients. But the truth is, like, the cohesion of the business is what's going to
Mhm.
move the needle for the business, right? And so, like,
Yeah.
how do we kind of step back and not be so territorial? Again, I don't know
I
if that exactly answers your question, but I
No,
think
it
I
does.
think there's really an important I think it's really important, especially as like AI is entering into this conversation, um, to remember that when it was more simplistic tech that was running SEO, like, yes, these like technical, logical, left brain experiments like with keyword density worked until they didn't. They worked
Yeah.
until the systems caught up, and then they had to revert back to human friendliness. And like, can we just like shorten the arc of that eventuality and get to the point where we like still put humans first? I don't know.
I think I was talking to Matt Brooks of SEOteric about the concept of brand, because I was part of a big brand in SEO called Raven Tools, and joining their team, it was very much like jumping on the back of an elephant with all of its inertia. And then you have five other people that also want the elephant to go somewhere. And if you're all shouting and bopping on different sides, it's going to has kind of a momentum, a direction it's already plotting.
Yes.
So you can't take full control away from those five other people, but you can convince them, the majority of them, or show the value of, hey, if we all lean this way, we can avoid the cliff over there. And they're
Yes.
like, well, what about the thorns? And you're like, okay, there's going to be some pain involved. So like those collaborative decisions are key in a proper, fully developed SEO campaign. Like the days of, just cracking open your Ahrefs, your SEMrush, your keyword volume tool from your API and just making decisions about the website in the dark, or disconnected from a sales team, disconnected from the email team, disconnected from the CEO and his vision, disconnected from the product manager who's queued up from his launch. That doesn't work anymore, because that search volume story, that narrative of, hey, if we just do these things and we'll be rewarded with Google because this is how much volume is there, attract it, here's the math, we can kind of map it out. That doesn't quite work as well anymore, because you have so many countervailing interests. And the reality is that any search volume number should be seen as just a starting point, because you can pump that number up through influencer campaigns. You can increase that search volume number through advertising campaigns. You can augment that by audience capture, because frankly, the search volume amounts that are being allowed to come to organic are shrinking. Even the click to call element on the Google local pack, well, that's just been moved over to paid only. And there's more, organic is getting sandwiched after, paid ad, the number one organic, AI overview, and then three blue links, as we call them. It used to be 10 blue links. The pool is shrinking in terms of like these top positions for any organic keyword. So you can't rely solely on the proposition of, highest search volume, I just need to optimize for that. It's got to be more. You have to be thinking about long-term audience acquisition. You have to think about how are we satisfying the need and intent of our returning visitors, and not just trading our search volume as this unending, potential blue ocean, but how can we make our own kiddie pool? How can we create our own
Exactly. Yes.
pools that we can fish in consistently? Um, instead of relying on wild caught salmon.
Well, I think that's exactly right. I think I was talking to a colleague of mine who's in the SEO space, and she talks a lot about high intent keywords, right? Like, it's one thing to go viral, it's another thing to capture that virality and like convert it into long-term loyalty, right? Um and I think that's the intersection of the tactics and the brand. Like, do you know who you want to attract? And do you actually know like what the volume of that audience is? And is is your objective to really just get the biggest volume number, or is your objective to get the accurate volume number? And like, if you don't know the trickle down of all of that, like, how many leads do you need to convert in order to hit your numbers, right? Like, and so what I see a lot of times in and I'll back up. What I see as like the role of brand in all things business really is um often flattened to attracting, right? And I think SEO probably has a similar, like, despite the fact that sometimes they feel at odds, like the flattened down objective of SEO is attraction, but really like it's about attraction is about setting an expectation, meeting an expectation, and then exceeding the expectation is where like that loyalty piece comes in. And again,
Mhm.
back to our previous little tangent, you know, if the SEO research is done well and the keyword research is done well, then you're going to have pages that are setting the right expectation. But then if the content built around those things is not up to snuff, then you're not going to meet the expectation, right? And it's not
Yeah.
going to create the result that you ultimately want, because the result that you ultimately want is not search volume. It's conversion and retention, right? And so like
Yes.
you can always find a big number to point at, out of context or in a sliver and be like, "Yay, big numbers." But like big numbers of what, I think is a really important part to keep in mind. And admittedly, I am like way too right brain to like to run anything SEO. Like even when I was doing website stuff, I'd be like, I just want to be like really clear. Like, I'm an experienced designer. You're going to have to activate this website or like bring somebody else in like that. And anything where I have to really keep up on the research instead of kind of trust the wisdom of the ages is going to be out of my lane of things I want to be responsible for. So it's very grateful that there's people like you out in the world doing the complementary other side of the coin work.
I think that's the fascinating part about, it really comes down to human behavior and analysis is really the foundation of all marketing. And, you know, you can approach it from, a survey perspective, type of here's the data that says that people react to these colors, more on CTA elements. And that data is technically true, but if it's done in a vacuum, you can always cherry pick data to support hypothesis. Um, but without the other side of it, of the creative aspect of, okay, yes, if the button is in an opposite tone, it draws more attention. But if that's done in a way that's clashing with your overall brand aesthetic, and it's the call to action is super ham-fisted, it's not lined up with what your sales team is actually trained to close on, you can drive. And I've been in this scenario where like SEO comes to the table, they're like, hey, we saw these numbers, we created all of these leads, and we killed it. And then sales comes back and says, this is the worst quarter that we've had ever. And we're like, what? I don't under how I got you like three times as many leads. We got the conversion. Like, yeah, but none of them they're converting at a third because they're not the right person. They're not within the organ, they're not the decision maker or this friction or that friction. And that's as much human psychology, understanding the business process as anything else.
Yes.
What are some of the biggest um misses that you've witnessed in terms of a campaign kicking off, seeming successful, but not quite catching the goal?
Well, to be, full transparency, I don't do a lot of campaign management because we do more we're more of the like identity design on the front end. And that's actually something I've been really trying to figure out in our business is like how do we kind of keep our finger on the pulse better of the activation campaigns that come after us.
Mhm.
But what I will say is that, I think it's really important when you're developing any kind of campaign, because I think, there's like the growth marketing lane, which you're talking about is the one that is going to come across like really it's expensive to really do it well. But like I experienced that growth marketers versus brand marketers are a lot more confident in their ability to promise return on investment, right? Because you're working with numbers, because you're going after sales, like you're going after that that fiscal result in a different way. And so I see that tension. And what I've really, what I encourage my clients to do after they leave me when they're evaluating a campaign from the beginning is to really think, like to your point, what you just said, who is your ideal audience for this, right? Where do they need to land? Where do they need to, like, what are the sequences of events that they need to go to? But I think, you know, it's really easy when you're dealing with something that's kind of like heady, like SEO, to get overwhelmed as a business owner or a decision maker inside of a business and just be like, okay, you know what you're talking about. Like, you do it for me. And to not to start to like kind of not evaluate the underlying strategies that are there and just say, okay, if it works, do it. But it's like not every strategy, there's tons of valid sound strategies that get successful activation all the time, but it's not necessarily just a successful strategy doesn't mean it's the right strategy for your business.
Mhm.
And I think more business owners need tools to evaluate the fit of strategy for their business, right? Like, I'll give you an example that I just recently internally we hired a sales um like an outsourced lead generation team, and they're like, we get all these results for our clients. We help, 500 businesses a year, yada, yada, yada. And then they sent me these scripts that they're going to send out on our behalf. And it's like, these are working for all the other brand agencies in our client pool. Well, like, I don't want to use the same strategy as every other brand, all of my competitors that are in your client pool. You know what I mean? Like, that's not what I want. And what it's promising is what they think will get results, right? So it's like in the SEO terms, it's like, yeah, I might have success running that keyword campaign, but is it going to differentiate me from my client, from my competitors, or is it going to just keep me neck and neck with them? Is it going to actually attract the people that I want? Or is it like a click and switch, a bait and switch kind of thing? Because these scripts that they're sending me are like, they're promising things that we immediately can't deliver because that's not how our business is structured. You know what I mean? So I think before it's like, um, looking at what makes a campaign having been a success is a very important thing to offer. But I think for my clients, like a lot of them are making decisions around what campaigns to invest in the first
Mhm.
place, and like being able to step back and have a way of like putting on like what would the brand do and saying like this is the wrong date for me to go on. Like this is the this is the wrong campaign. It might be valid and it might have had traction in 7 other businesses, but I can tell you right now that this is not the right strategy for us, and I think too few business owners have the ability to do that with confidence and choose the right campaigns from the jump.
I It reminds me we built a, content gap analysis tool, and I had to develop an extra warning on it that I put into it of if you're looking at your competitors and looking at what, uh, you're not doing that they are only, you are in too much, you are just duplicating their business and making yourself more like them. A a counter function after you get that data is to then say, what is the gap that none of my competitors are addressing, and how can I fit into that niche? Because that's the competitor fallacy, like, oh hey, I want to do competitive analysis, see what's successful, see what's working. If you only duplicate what's working for other people, then you're only going to get a smaller and smaller piece of the pie, because you're aligning yourself more and more with where somebody else is already succeeding.
Right.
So there has to be that, that value option. It came up in a conversation with a client. We're analyzing them for, delivering precast concrete walls, and like, the competitor is promising this delivery angle and that delivery angle. I'm like, we need to interview the actual person who does the installation. And we did. And in that conversation, it came up frequently. Oh, hey, they always ask for can we put something under the ground for anti-dig? And I'm
Mm.
like, anti-dig, like there's no volume for that. Like it only comes up with dogs. And like, I swear to you, every single time we install these walls, they ask if it can be put in deeper so that people can't just dig under these expensive walls and just invalidate their existence. Like, oh, well, that makes sense. And, that's a competitive angle that wouldn't have been surfaced any other way.
Right.
So is it that goes back again to just the human element, right? Of what do you have in your stack of processes to have those conversations to better understand the USPs that you're working with at the outset?
Yeah. So I'll point you toward, or the audience towards, our brand IDQ framework. So that's our signature framework that I've developed, and we used to, you know, carry it out one-on-one interviews over extensive periods of time, and it was like really indulgent and wonderful. But like, let's be honest, the world is moving faster than that. So over this past year, I've been working really diligently to uh build our own tech stack around this exact question. Like, how do I tease apart the identity of the founder? And we work with founder-led brands, specifically in the service-driven space, where the human experience is really central to the success over time. So we look at, like, how do I tease the founder identity apart from the brand identity so that it can be articulated, codified, and transferred to the whole team, so that it's not just the marketing team that's creating the visuals and the core messaging, but we can give this to the sales team. We can give this to the SEO team. We can give this to the finance team. We can give this to operations, and everybody has that same lens of glasses that they can put on, that essentially they can ask the brand, what needs to happen here? Like, what needs to happen here? And it's before mood board, before positioning, before ICP, it's the logic set that the founder has historically tapped into instinctively and through intuition. We can start to tease that out so that all people in the organization can make those same kind of sequential decisions. And we have something that we call the brand integrity statement, which very clearly lays out, like, it's recommended that the brand make decisions in this way. These are the things you want to be mindful of, because if you are making decisions in this way, you might also fall victim to like the shortcomings of that way of making decisions. So, like, watch out for that, because that could undercut what you're trying to accomplish. Um, People around you need to be expressing certain things. Those are the signals that you're on the right track, right? These are the needs that need to be fulfilled. These are the habits that you should adopt. Here are the relational strategies that you want to deploy. And the relational strategies is, a really interesting part for the SEO conversation, because it will tell you, like, are you wanting, it'll help you figure out, like, what kind of keyword information, where all these things are coming together. So, for example, if you have a brand that's really oriented around um, care for the client, like, everyone wants to think that that's their prerogative, but it's not. And that's totally fine. Like, some prerogative is, to model new behavior, and some is to care and nurture the customer. And that's going to affect, like, when you're going through a list and you're thinking, okay, how do I run this campaign? You know, yes, these ones over here might, be the low-hanging fruit for your campaigns and ranking, but they might be not as aligned, and therefore they might produce the most volume up front, but they're not necessarily going to promote the most conversion and the most retention of business over time. And so I would definitely recommend, for anybody who's listening, if you're feeling like, that sounds great, Charlie, but how do I do that? So that tool is available on our website. We have what we call the integrity snapshot, which will give you, it's designed to extract that intuition and instinct very quickly and articulate back for you those core pieces that you can start to kind of filter all of your thinking through, so that, again, you're making decisions as the brand instead of
Yeah.
as yourself. Because especially for founders, like, sometimes we're so close to it, and our survival is, and our egos are all so interwoven with the success of something, that we can make decisions in our best interest. And sometimes that means keeping ourselves comfortable, or, avoiding something that we probably should do. When you can kind of tease that apart a little bit more, it's much easier to be objective about like what is really the best decision for the brand in this moment, in this conversation, in this arena.
Absolutely love that. If people want to have more conversation with you, connect, I'll make sure that those resources get linked in the show notes, of course. But where can people find you? Are you doing any conferences, or are you active on a particular social channel where people can? Love it. Thank you. Thank you for so much for sharing your expertise.